So today's day one of our Codebusters thing. It's gonna mainly focus on like aristocrats as a type of cipher. And we'll get more into that like in a bit. So yeah, I'm Angelina. You can call me Ange if that's easier. And a fun fact about me is that I play tennis. So this is what our schedule is going to look like for the next 3 days in June because it continues into August. So today we're going to be doing aristocrats. Then tomorrow we're going to be moving on to Baconians. And then on Friday we'll start Pollux and Morbid ciphers. Just like a very rough schedule. Also feel free to stop me if you have any questions because there's not a lot of us here, so we'll have like a ton of time to go over stuff. So just some basic vocabulary before we get into like working with ciphers is that plain text is basically just English text. So anything you see in English in the problem, well, besides like the problem itself, like if they give you like a chain of like phrases or words that you can actually read and understand, then that's probably in plain text. Anything that you're unable to understand, I think today we're only going to be working with jumbled up letters and words, then that's ciphertext. Later we're going to be working with jumbled up symbols and numbers, which is more confusing, but anything that you can't really understand in English would be in ciphertext or in Spanish. Okay, that's actually useful because I don't know why we don't have French ciphers, or at least we don't compete in French ciphers. So we only have Spanish. Yeah, I forgot that you don't choose a language until middle school. But yeah, we do Spanish ciphers. But you only do one type of them, but still, it's still helpful to know a bit of Spanish because it does help you. And then encrypting and enciphering means you're translating or you're basically translating from English or plain text into ciphertext. So you're translating what you know into stuff that you really can't read in English. And then decrypting or deciphering is doing it the other way around. So you're going from ciphertext or things that you can't understand to plain text. It also like if these words are like kind of confusing, like deciphering, like like the prefix kind of means to like undo. So you're undoing what's like unreadable into something that's more understandable. Yeah. Okay, so this is gonna be a while before you start taking the tests that we typically take or like this class is designed for. But just to go over the structure, there's a lot of questions, as in I think there's like 30 questions to 40 questions. And the whole point of the test is to get as many right as possible. And you're not meant to finish. I don't even know if you're supposed to finish half of the test. It's like very meant to be very difficult. But what's pretty cool is that the test opens with a 10-minute timed question. And if you get it within 10 minutes, you get bonus points. And this type of question is almost always an aristocrat, or from what I've seen, it's always been an aristocrat for me. I don't know if it's just because it's the type of test I've taken, but typically it's an aristocrat. And points are taken off for every letter that's incorrect. And if you get a certain number of letters incorrect, I think it's like, I want to say 6 or 7, then you don't get any points anymore. And how my team does it is that we typically split up the problems based on what we're better at, and what I'm going to be going into detail about in this class is what I typically do on the team. Or like what I'm better at because it's easier for me to teach. But I will also be going into the other ones that my teammates typically handle and are, I want to say, like more geared towards them, or like that they're better at. Okay, so a reference table, what is that? So this is not the complete reference table. I'll pull it up. So on every single test, you get a reference table that kind of looks like this. It's 2 pages of a lot of stuff you can refer to, hence why it's called a reference table. But a lot of that is not going to be used today. What we're mainly going to use is the frequency of English letters, and we're not going to do Spanish today. But because I think the Spanish ciphers actually require like a pretty high level of Spanish that I think it takes me like 2 to 3 hours to solve one, so we should we'll put that on the back burner for now. And then On the right here, I wish I could use a pointer. Okay, what? On the right here, we have all of these numbers, or not no, numbers and letters, and basically in English, like the English alphabet has 26 letters, and when you try to like sort of translate plain text into ciphertext and ciphertext into plain text, sometimes we use math to make it easier. And the general consensus is that like this is what happens when you take like the remainder of A when you divide it by 26. So it'd be A would be 0 when you divide it by 26, B would be 1 when you divide it by 26, C would be 2 when you divide by 26, and so on and so forth. And in general, it just makes it easier to go through the letters if you assign a number for all of them, because you'll see in a bit why it's a way easier to assign them to numbers. And then, yeah, I was going to have you guess, or have you guys guess what letter is the most common in English, but it's actually displayed up here. It's E. I didn't know E was actually the most common letter in English. I thought it was T or S, but apparently S is not that common. Okay, aristocrats, my favorite. So this is like a typical cryptogram or cipher or like problem that you'll end up seeing, both like in your everyday life as well as on the actual test. And the good thing about aristocrats is that the words themselves are preserved. So if your word in English has two letters and a space, then your word in ciphertext also has two letters and a space. So it makes it easier to go through um, and solve aristocrats in comparison to other ciphers where word spaces aren't preserved and they change it around. And no letter will stand for itself, and the replacement table is given as a guide. So what that means is that if you have the letter A in English, then it cannot be the letter A in ciphertext. So sometimes that eliminates possibilities, but it's very, very, very like uncommon that they repeat. Like that you will ever have a situation where you have to make like this decision of having it not repeat. And then the replacement table, I'll show you guys that in a bit. It's basically just all like the letters A through Z in plain text and then all the letters from A to Z in ciphertext so that you can keep track of what letter you're swapping out for what. And yeah, I guess aristocrats is just a fancy word of, or fancy way of saying like a specific type of cipher. But yeah. So we're gonna be solving this aristocrat. So let's solve this aristocrat together. Um, it looks really, really like a lot, but I'll point out some things that'll probably help us. So do we see that there's only one letter here? In the English alphabet, what are the only two letters that can stand on their own?
A and I.
Mm-hmm. So this can either be A or I. A, okay, let's put A. Okay, and then this is the replacement table. It tells you how common the letters are and how often they appear. So as a last resort, you can guess based on how frequent letters are, but you see that this is our ciphertext, and this is what we're replacing it with in the English language. So we're guessing that T is going to be A. And I honestly think that's a pretty good guess because A is pretty common in the alphabet and T appears quite a lot. So if you want, do you want to help me fill in all the T's and change them to A's? I feel like R appears a lot. Do you see that? It ends in an R. So I think R is probably going to be a vowel. That's pretty common. Do you remember what's the most common letter in the English alphabet? E, right. Okay, so we're replacing R with E. I think this looks pretty suspicious, especially because this word appears twice. And I think that the letter A appears a lot. And yeah, it's the next most common next to Y. Do you have any guesses as to what that could be? Like, what word could end in E blank E? Like, okay, this one might be a harder one, actually. Um, I think it could either be a Z for something like wheeze or like an S for something like cheese. Which one do you think is more likely to happen? Just based on the fact that A appears 5 times, and that's relatively more common.
Um, maybe cheese?
Okay, yeah, let's try cheese. I think that's probably the better guess of the two. Cheese. Okay, cheese. Okay, so that means for A, for all A's, we would put an S. For all Y's, we would put an H. And then for all I's, we would put a C. Okay, I think that's it. I guess the next place to look is that you see how this sentence ends in a question mark? That means that this word is probably a question word, or it's definitely a question word. But what question word has a blank and then HA and then ends in another letter? If you think of the 5 W's plus the H, it's one of the W's. Yeah, okay, it's blank. Or I'm pretty sure it's blank. And then D would be W, and then V would be 2. So we can fill the rest of that out. Oh, also, I was gonna point this out. This is a very common word pattern. What that essentially means is that it's a pattern where you see one letter, for example, let's just use A, another letter, and then you see the same letter repeat again. So if you see something along the lines of A, B, C, A, in this case it was V, Y, T, V, it's most likely going to be that. So if you see something like that, you can fill it in immediately and it would save you a lot of time. We have a couple of vowels left to work with, but before we do that, I think we should look at this word. It's it's standing out to me because we have the first 2 letters and the last 2 letters repeat. So there's not a lot of letters to choose from, especially in the English language where they repeat and they make a word. So what do we think the X's could be?
L?
Yup, they're L's. Okay, and honestly, I think we have enough of the cipher down. Um, that we can start trying to make more like better guesses about what the rest of the problem or letters could be. So it's what something something call a something. So what do you think? Oh, this is gonna be kind of hard, but what do you think these 2 letters or these 2 words should be? If you're asking somebody what's blank blank call. Actually, before we do that, do this instead because I forgot to fill in the C. But what English letter is, or what English word can you form with C, A, and then a blank? Yep, it is can. So what do you call a can? Okay. Um, of cano, is it a can? This is probably like a preposition. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's like it describes what the can has. So what do you think this word should be? Yep. Do you want to write all up there while I fill in what they correspond to? O, F. Oh, that's great. And it appears multiple times. So we should find that and fill it out. Oh, okay. This gives us a lot of stuff. So what? Okay. What do you think goes here? It is a D. So let me fill it in. Yep. What do you? Let me just fill it in. Oh, and this is great. There's more than one key, so we can write it here. What do you call a can of cheese? Do you know like the type of cheese it's talking about? This is kind of like really weird. It's not very common, but just in case you do know, do you happen to know? No worries. It's can of cheese whiz. I think this used to be very big back in the day. It's like, I don't know if you know what silly string is, but I think it's like that, but like cheese. So like people used to eat cheese out of that, which I think was really interesting. But can of cheese whiz that blank 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 blank. Okay. What do you think this should be? Because was is already here. So I think that really only leaves like one option for this word. Oh, yep, has blank. Mhm. What do you think the next word could be? Oh, also I realized we already had the H. Anyways, that was great. That has oh, and we also have the S, no? That has been used. I think this is used up. That makes no sense. That has blank used up. What's an English word that goes with has that you typically do to describe an action that's already happened in the past? What do you call a can of cheese whiz that has been used up? Cheese whiz. That's pretty good. And you don't have to fill out the table. It's just for reference, and it's sometimes it's easier, but sometimes it takes away time. But to start out, I think it's good that we fill out the table. How about you?